Surrounded by top aides, including the defense secretary, his chief of staff, the Joint Chiefs chairman, General Dan Kane, in this case, as he was making this decision and watching the immediate aftermath of this strike playing out. And obviously, huge questions still remain about what's to come. We'll see if the president takes any of those questions as reporters are waiting for him on the tarmac there at Joint Base Andrews. As we noted, there are many questions for the president about what could happen next here and the extent of the U.S. involvement and his objectives. If he speaks, we'll obviously bring that to you live as it happens. And one question that still remains tonight when it comes to oil futures, as they are surging in the first trades since the United States and Israel went to war with Iran over the weekend. We've seen this playing out. In the meantime, stock futures are down, and futures for the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow were all down more than 1%. I'm joined right now by Patrick DeHaan, who is the head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy. And Patrick, obviously, there are huge questions here, especially, incredibly grave ones, given U.S. service members' lives have been lost as a result of this. The president is warning what's to come. There's also Americans who are asking how this will impact them on a daily basis. And what do you make of what you're seeing in these numbers so far?
Well, at least for now, kind of right on course with what we had expected. Earlier yesterday, the initial gut response I felt was maybe a $5 or $10 barrel increase given everything's going on. Now, there's a lot of headlines, there's a lot of questions, none of which we have a whole lot of clarity on. But typically, we see a spike in the price of oil. And so far, in the last 15 minutes or so, that's exactly what we've been delivered, at least so far. WTI crude oil prices back above the $70 a barrel mark. We're up about 7 or 8% to about $72, $73 a barrel. While they may sound pretty large, put that in comparison back when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, when the economy was reopening amidst COVID relief. We saw oil prices in a matter of a week jump about $22 a barrel. So this is a pretty small response so far. Obviously, a lot of developments still likely here in the days ahead. Consumers are likely to notice the national average tomorrow will likely exceed the $3 a gallon mark for the first time in 2026. You'll notice behind me right now, it's actually taking a little bit lower at $2.94 a gallon. But tomorrow, I would expect some sticker shock for some areas. This is not going to be an overnight massive spike, but it will be noticeable to most motorists. But again, to put this in comparison to Russia, this is not going to be nearly what we saw back in 2022 when not only Russia invaded Ukraine, but when we saw COVID relief as well. So still very noticeable. This will play out over the next coming weeks based on new developments.
Yeah, well, what about, obviously they'll see what they see tomorrow. If this continues to go on for another week or even another month, it's not even really clear how long this could happen, then what impact could that have on prices?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this is not necessarily a short-term approach. The Trump administration had made quite clear, in fact, that this was not going to be just a one-day attack and done. This could be dragged on for potentially several weeks. And to your point, this could get worse depending on what those developments look like. Obviously, right now, Iran reacting to a lot of the U.S. strikes in a very unpredictable way. And that is part of the risk assessment that we're seeing show up in the price of oil. That uncertainty is what's driving oil prices up. The known would reduce oil prices if there becomes clarity, but it's the unknown that is stoking fears and oil prices reaction tonight. So if there is some sort of clarity in the days ahead, whether from Iran or the United States or Israel, on how long this would last, would be able to put potentially an end date for the potential impacts that we're seeing. Now, keep in mind, this is all happening as well as gas prices have already risen for nearly 4 straight weeks. The seasonality, the warming temperatures this summer driving prices up as well. So a bit of a double whammy now.
Yeah, Patrick DeHaan. And we're back now with our breaking news as Israel has launched this new wave of attacks on dozens of Iranian targets, with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, arguing that it's only going to get more intense as it goes on. We're learning that at least 9 people were killed after an Iranian missile struck in a residential area near Jerusalem. The former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, joins me now. And Ambassador, thank you for being here, because I think a lot of people are looking at what's playing out right now between the United States and Israel and Iran and asking, what is next militarily in your view?
Good to be with you, Caitlin, and it's good morning here in Tel Aviv. What's going to continue, I think, as the Prime Minister said, is that there's going to be an intensification of the military activity by the United States, by Israel, against the Iranian regime. The goal, a stated goal, is to actually bring down the regime. I don't know if that can be done by military means alone. Certainly, military means from the air, without having sort of a corresponding popular revolt, as we saw in the previous weeks before the war. But that is the stated goal. For Israel specifically, it's to eliminate Iran's ability to strike us with these ballistic missiles, which are huge. You mentioned that 9 people were killed this morning. That explosion, even though it's about a 40-minute drive from here, shook this building in Tel Aviv. And last night, another building hit, killed another woman, a 40-year-old woman in Tel Aviv, also shook this building. These missiles pack about 2,500 pounds of TNT. They're quite big, and Iran has thousands of them. So for Israel, that is a strategic threat, which has to be eliminated.
I mean, the White House and some Republicans have been arguing this could go on for a month, potentially. I mean, is Israel capable of carrying this out for another month, in your view?
It is indeed, and we're going to have challenges in terms of our anti-missile arsenals, our stockpiles of interceptors of various types. We have a multi-layered umbrella that includes lower level, which is Iron Dome, which you probably know, David Sling, and intermediate level, then the Arrow systems, which are orbital and suborbital. We also have laser systems now that can take down drones. But still, we are a small country with limited arsenals. And there's also the question of simply jet fuel and also ordnance for the jets. But last summer, we maintained a very steady pace for 12 days. A month is doubling that, a little bit more. I think it's within Israel's capabilities.
You're suggesting that maybe a regime change can't be carried out by military force alone. Obviously, that's what we're seeing play out here. I think there are a lot of questions about who potentially is going to lead Iran next and whether or not this is going to work. Certainly from the U.S. perspective of people who say, regime change has been tried before and it hasn't exactly been successful. I mean, how does Israel define success here?
Well, historically, there has been some successes. World War II is a good one. There was good regime change in Germany and Japan. And our next door neighbors in Iraq are no longer suffering under the rule of Saddam Hussein. So there have been examples where it has worked. But in this case, without having boots on the ground, it's very, very difficult. And the president has made it very clear that he's not putting American boots on the ground. And we certainly aren't in the state of Israel. I think, again, the goal from Israel's perspective is to eliminate the threat, and that is a strategic threat. If Iran has thousands of these missiles, these 2,500-pound missiles, they'll be able to use that umbrella to advance their nuclear program, to continue to support terror throughout the region, and we won't be able to really respond because we'll have these missile threats pressed to our foreheads. And I think that is the immediate goal for Israel. For the United States, I think it's also to create a situation where the Iranian regime, if it's not replaced by a popular revolt, will no longer be in a position to threaten America's allies in the Middle East or to threaten America through terror, through interrupting international shipping, or for that matter, attempting to assassinate the President of the United States.
How long do you think this could go on for? I mentioned a month that some senators have said here. The president himself mentioned a month earlier. Is that Israel's expectation?
Mm-hmm. We have to prepare for that expectation, certainly. And keep in mind, I'm sitting here in South Tel Aviv. We had to run to our bomb shelter about 30 times today. And that's a pretty normal fact. And it's quite frightening because even our bomb shelters, we found out, cannot withstand a direct hit by these rockets. So you're sitting there with your family and you have a few minutes to get into the bomb shelters, and then you count down the seconds till there's an explosion. And if the explosion is not on your head, you consider yourself very fortunate. So it takes a tremendous price. There's people who aren't necessarily going to work. There's no traffic in our streets. The kids are not in school. Tomorrow is a Jewish holiday, and it's a holiday of celebration. Not many people are going to be celebrating. So our lives are very profoundly interrupted here. But we are a resilient society, and we have a very advanced and deep-seated civil defense system here of sirens, of bomb shelters. We can hold out. Unfortunately, tragically, we're very well versed at this.
You are very well versed with obviously there's been so much of that happening. We've seen just how much the Iron Dome has been put to use because of this. When it comes to how Iran is responding and the retaliation here, and beyond what that looks like for everyday life. I mean, what do you think this means for the region overall and what we're seeing play out following the death of the supreme leader? But as you made clear, Israel wants to go further than that in terms of eliminating key figures in the regime.
Well, it's an excellent question, and it begins with this. The answer is that Iran has been responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of people throughout the Middle East, and not just in the Middle East. It was the key catalyst for the war of the last 2.5 years in Gaza, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. It was the primary backer of Hezbollah and Hamas and other terrorist organizations in our region. It has sworn to destroy us every day since coming to power in 1979, and not just sworn, it's acted on that and trying to develop the means to realize that vision of destruction. So if Iran is eliminated as this type of terrible catalyst for violence and war in the Middle East, it opens up many, many possibilities. Already, with the degraded Iran, we've been able to have talks with Lebanon, talks with Syria. That was unthinkable 2.5 years ago. Just last week, we had Mr. Modi from India visiting here. We could actually envision a situation where you would have an arc of peace of pro-Western strategic alliance that would stretch from the Tel Aviv beach, not far from where I'm talking to you, all the way to the banks of the Ganges, under sort of a Pax Americana in the Middle East. That would be ideal. But if Iran succeeds in emerging from this with the same regime, and that regime gets a sanction relief and can then use that money again to build up its proxies in the region and invest in terror, in tunnels, and in rockets, we could find ourselves back on, say, October 6, 2023. And nobody wants that. We don't want it, certainly. And I know the United States doesn't want it either.
Marine One at Joint Base Andrews. He notably declined to speak with reporters who were gathered there on the tarmac with an arm of questions in hand when it comes to the strikes that the president launched over the weekend and authorized against Iran, strikes that are ongoing and, as the president has previewed today, could happen for at least another month potentially. That comes as a result of the deaths of 3 U.S. service members. As the president has been bluntly warning the American people, there could be more American deaths as a result of this war with Iran that is playing out right now. We do have one more opportunity to potentially see and hear from the president, who has not yet taken questions from reporters on camera. As he arrives back at the White House, we'll be watching that moment closely. I will say, as a White House reporter, it's pretty notable the president did not gaggle with reporters on Air Force One. Typically, on Sundays when he's heading back from his Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, he will come back on the plane and speak with reporters, take their questions, especially after such a notable moment as the major foreign policy decision that he made over the weekend. For example, you'll remember after the capture of Maduro in Venezuela, we heard from the president, the Secretary of State, and other top officials on their reasoning, on their rationale, and what is going to happen next. I should note this comes as we are hearing from sources here at CNN that U.S. officials are on the watch for potential suicide attacks, in addition to any other kind of retaliation targeting American families and personnel that are abroad in response to the ongoing military operation in Iran that's been playing out. My colleague Zach Cohen has this new reporting. And Zach, what exactly are officials on the lookout for in light of what's happening in Iran right now?
Yeah, Caitlin, I'm told that in addition to the wave of retaliatory strikes we've already seen launched by Iran in response to this ongoing military operation, U.S. officials are also prepared for Iran to use a range of capabilities to potentially target American personnel and facilities across the region and abroad. Those include potential suicide attacks, and also the use of vehicle-borne improvised explosives to potentially carry out attacks against U.S. persons and U.S. bases around the country or around the world. And we're also learning now for the first time the 3 service members who we know have already been killed in a retaliatory strike by Iran were killed at a U.S. military base in Kuwait. And so this was in a suspected drone strike or a drone attack by the Iranians, which again highlights another capability that the Iranians have beyond its missile arsenal.
Do we know, Zach, if the U.S. military has been able to notify those families yet?
Yeah, Caitlin, the last I'm told is that process was in motion. I think we're waiting for that to play out before CENTCOM and the military comes out publicly and confirms some of the details that are already starting to come out now.
Yeah, just devastating for those families, obviously, and our thoughts are with them as they are getting the worst news that any military family can get tonight. Zach Cohen, please keep us updated, and thank you for that. I'm also joined here this hour by our CNN national security analyst, Beth Sanner, who's the former deputy director of the DNI. And Beth, just when you look at this, and not hearing from the president just now was pretty notable. We'll see if he speaks when he gets to the White House. There is still another opportunity for him to take questions from reporters. But for a president who famously touts how much he talks to the press, to see him descend Air Force One, hop on Marine One, and not take those questions from reporters, do you think that the president has done enough or anything to lay out the justification for what's happening in Iran right now?
Well, I had to go on to Truth Social to watch his video that he put out a couple hours ago. And I don't really think that, most Americans have that, know that that's even happening. I just think that the comparison to previous presidents and even to this president, it just marks such a departure on something that is literally bigger than anything that we have done in so many years. And when I listened to that Truth Social, that address to the nation, I guess we can call it, it really didn't offer an explanation about, why we're doing this, except kind of, I would sum up, because we can.
Beyond an explanation for why, is it clear to you what the benchmark is for ending this?
No, right. And that's something I think is really crucial. You're supposed to start any kind of major thing with a clarity on what you're trying to achieve, because that drives what you do. It seems kind of obvious, right? But that's military planning, right? You start with, what are you trying to do? And I remember when I was on the National Security Council for a number of years under George H.W. Bush, and we would plan. We would have these quarterly planning meetings where we decided things like, oh, we want to have German reunification. And we literally would plan backwards, how do we get there? And because we haven't done that, Caitlin, we don't know how it's going to end. We don't know when it might end. And we could turn into this situation where we just kind of keep going and going and going because we don't know. And it also means we didn't set ourselves up for success in the first place. Because if we were really going for regime change, we should have put a lot more into building up and helping the opposition get to the point where they could take over. And we haven't done, I think, nearly enough in that realm.
Do you think it's too late for that? Because I think a lot of people are going to say this has brought about the death of a brutal leader in Iran that has suppressed people for decades. And we've seen all the crackdowns, such a hardliner. Is it too late for the United States to get involved to help those people in Iran? I mean, when you hear from the president, he says, we did our part, we fulfilled our promise, we took out the supreme leader, now it's your turn. Could we see the U.S. get more involved, do you think?
I think we could. And Representative Naylor was on yesterday, and he's a very smart person. And he said, well, now's the time we're gonna all sit in Congress and we'll talk to our allies about how we can help the opposition. And I'm like, and making it sound like this is a normal thing to do at this point. Well, it's not normal to do it at this point. But I do think that it's possible for us to do more. And I expect that CIA and other parts of our government will be working on that with some of our partners. But and this is the thing, Caitlin, I feel very conflicted. I wonder if other viewers feel this way too. It's like, here we are, and how can you not support getting rid of this brutal dictator? And this is why we have Iranians cheering on the streets, right? It's great. But does that mean that we all should support what we are doing now going forward? Or should we say, we should be doing something different? I feel like now it's like we're so far into this that we kind of have to go forward, even though we're not set up for success, and this really isn't justified under international law. And that has really big implications down the road.
I think you make such a good point there in terms of what could happen next year, because that has also been why Americans feel so conflicted over, entanglements in the Middle East, is that it's got this notion going in that everyone agrees with in terms of seeing a democracy or seeing women have rights, seeing people have rights, that have lived under a brutal regime, but then the United States action and involvement doesn't always bring that about, as we know historically.
No. Exactly. I mean, Rumsfeld said at the beginning of the Iraq War that there was no way this was going to last more than, a few weeks and maybe a few months. And then look what happened, right? And then I think that the whole thing about President Trump talking now about negotiating with this regime, which the White House has tried to walk back, but we would actually negotiate now with this regime that is so illegitimate, that has killed so many scores of Iraqis. And we would negotiate with them, which would then make them stronger, even if it's a different version of the same thing. Like Adelcy Rodriguez in the Iraqi context is not the same thing.
Yeah, and obviously, President Trump has delivered 2 statements on camera since he launched a major U.S. military operation against Iran. We have not yet seen him live, though, meaning he takes the questions in front of the White House press pool, answering the reporters' questions in terms of what the United States and Israel and their objectives in Iran are and what that's going to look like. We also have not heard from the top members of his administration. That's no.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Burnett, live from Tel Aviv. And as I say good evening, it is, of course, 5 o'clock in the morning here, a new day dawning in a Middle East that is dealing with war. And that is the reality on the ground right now. Welcome to this special edition of Out Front as we cover this for you. Air raid sirens throughout the day, sounds of explosions within the past hour or so on a new front between Hezbollah in Lebanon and the IDF. The situation growing more fraught as the Pentagon has just put out new video of strikes on Iranian jets and drones. So they're just putting that video out as well, as the Israeli military does confirm that it is striking in Lebanon after they say Hezbollah struck. We could hear that back and forth where we are standing very clearly. Right now, the IDF says it does not wish to harm the Lebanese who live in the villages that it is targeting, but we also know they have been targeting into the Beirut suburbs using some heavier munitions for munitions underground. This new front in the war coming as Israel says it intercepted several projectiles coming in from Lebanon. And Iran now has just put out a new video showing a stockpile of weapons that have been used to hit U.S. bases in the region, according to the Iranians. That's what they're saying. And we don't know exact dates on this, but we do know that they've been putting that video out. It appears to show, the purpose of it to show that the Iranian state is still functioning, that the regime is still in place. And you can see rows of drones along with rocket launchers. It does come after President Trump said that this war could go on for up to 4 weeks, and then subsequently told the New York Times that there are going to be more U.S. casualties, warning that more U.S. troops will die. When he referred to the tragic loss of troops at a base in Kuwait, he said, quote, 3 is too many as far as I'm concerned. If you look at projections, they do projections, you know, it could be quite a bit higher than that. We expect casualties. And painful and blunt truth. We have a team of reporters across the region. As I said, 5 o'clock in the morning here. It is already dawn in Tehran and in the Gulf. Nick Robertson is in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Julia Benbrook is at the White House. But I want to begin with you, Nick. Let's start with you. As I said, 5 o'clock in the morning here. It is dawn and a whole new day. A lot of the strikes that we've seen have come in broad daylight, right? The belief that this only happens at night has certainly been shattered in these past hours.
Yeah, and that's the big question now. New day, what does Iran do? We saw yesterday the strikes along the sort of Gulf Coast, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, all those places. There's been a joined up message overnight coming from the GCC, that is Saudi Arabia, that is Kuwait, that is Bahrain, that is Qatar, that is the UAE, that is Oman. A joined up statement calling these attacks unjustified with a very heavy and strong diplomatic warning indicating that they have the right to seek the defense and security of their countries here in the GCC. This is sort of an all for one, a one for all scenario, to the point, they say, of having the option to respond to aggression. So a very powerful diplomatic message. And in a way now it's over to Iran. And the question that's been buzzing here overnight is, what is the assessment that's that's being made into Iran. Who is making that assessment of what to do next? Is it joined up? Is it a collective decision? Or is it individual groups acting on old orders? So this is going to be a very important day, daybreak, where we see explosions along those Gulf coasts, where there'll be more efforts to try to target cities like Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, a very powerful and influential country in this region. And that's why the stakes are so high, because the analysis is, if this is a big day by Iran striking these GCC countries again, then that is really going to set the tempo for the coming weeks after that. And the implication is, if Iran does that, it'll be a high tempo.
Yeah. As we await here daybreak. Thank you very much, Nick, in Riyadh. And I want to go to Julia Benbrook. As I said, she's at the White House. And Julia, you know, we've talked about the silence from the White House on this. Yes, the president has given selected short interviews right to the New York Times, posting at Jonathan Karl to the Daily Mail, but not the big press conference, not the big announcement as he did with Venezuela. This has been very different. They have not wanted to talk, but I do understand you've got new reporting that the Pentagon will be holding a news conference. What are you learning?
Yeah, that's going to be the first time that we hear from top administration officials about that. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, as well as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, they are expected to speak with reporters at 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Burnett, live from Tel Aviv. And as I say good evening, it is, of course, 5 o'clock in the morning here, a new day dawning in a Middle East that is dealing with war. And that is the reality on the ground right now. Welcome to this special edition of Out Front as we cover this for you. Air raid sirens throughout the day, sounds of explosions within the past hour or so on a new front between Hezbollah in Lebanon and the IDF. The situation growing more fraught as the Pentagon has just put out new video of strikes on Iranian jets and drones. So they're just putting that video out as well, as the Israeli military does confirm that it is striking in Lebanon after they say Hezbollah struck. We could hear that back and forth where we are standing very clearly. Right now, the IDF says it does not wish to harm the Lebanese who live in the villages that it is targeting, but we also know they have been targeting into the Beirut suburbs using some heavier munitions for munitions underground. This new front in the war coming as Israel says it intercepted several projectiles coming in from Lebanon. And Iran now has just put out a new video showing a stockpile of weapons that have been used to hit U.S. bases in the region, according to the Iranians. That's what they're saying. And we don't know exact dates on this, but we do know that they've been putting that video out. It appears to show, the purpose of it to show that the Iranian state is still functioning, that the regime is still in place. And you can see rows of drones along with rocket launchers. It does come after President Trump said that this war could go on for up to 4 weeks, and then subsequently told the New York Times that there are going to be more U.S. casualties, warning that more U.S. troops will die. When he referred to the tragic loss of troops at a base in Kuwait, he said, quote, 3 is too many as far as I'm concerned. If you look at projections, they do projections, you know, it could be quite a bit higher than that. We expect casualties. And painful and blunt truth. We have a team of reporters across the region. As I said, 5 o'clock in the morning here. It is already dawn in Tehran and in the Gulf. Nick Robertson is in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Julia Benbrook is at the White House. But I want to begin with you, Nick. Let's start with you. As I said, 5 o'clock in the morning here. It is dawn and a whole new day. A lot of the strikes that we've seen have come in broad daylight, right? The belief that this only happens at night has certainly been shattered in these past hours.
Yeah, and that's the big question now. New day, what does Iran do? We saw yesterday the strikes along the sort of Gulf Coast, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, all those places. There's been a joined up message overnight coming from the GCC, that is Saudi Arabia, that is Kuwait, that is Bahrain, that is Qatar, that is the UAE, that is Oman. A joined up statement calling these attacks unjustified with a very heavy and strong diplomatic diplomatic warning indicating that they have the right to seek the defense and security of their countries here in the GCC. This is sort of an all-for-one, a one-for-all scenario, to the point, they say, of having the option to respond to aggression. So a very powerful diplomatic message. And in a way now it's over to Iran. And the question that's been buzzing here overnight is, what is the assessment that's being made in Tehran? Who is making that assessment of what to do next? Is it joined up? Is it a collective decision? Or is it individual groups acting on old orders? So this is going to be a very important day, daybreak, where we see explosions along those Gulf coasts, where there'll be more efforts to try to target cities like Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, a very powerful and influential country in this region. And that's why the stakes are so high, because the analysis is, if this is a big day by Iran striking these GCC countries again, then that is really going to set the tempo for the coming weeks after that. And the implication is, if Iran does that, it'll be a high tempo.
Yeah. As we await here daybreak. Thank you very much, Nick, in Riyadh. And I want to go to Julia Benbrook. As I said, she's at the White House. And Julia, you know, we've talked about the silence from the White House on this. Yes, the president has given selected short interviews, right, to the New York Times, posting at Jonathan Karl to the Daily Mail, but not the big press conference, not the big announcement as he did with Venezuela. This has been very different. They have not wanted to talk, but I do understand you've got new reporting that the Pentagon will be holding a news conference. What are you learning?
Yeah, that's going to be the first time that we hear from top administration officials about that. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, as well as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, they are expected to speak with reporters at 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. So a lot of those top administration officials, notably absent from the Sunday shows this morning, have not really been taking questions. And this might be our first glimpse at a lot of these key details. But so many questions to be answered. And as President Donald Trump arrived here at the White House a short time ago, he did not answer any of those questions, even as reporters shouted and tried to get him to come over and talk. And he has not taken consistent questions since the joint U.S.-Israel strikes against Iran, Operation Epic Fury. Most of his communication has been through social media. We saw that 8-minute post where he announced the strikes, and he also urged Iranians to seize control of their government after U.S. military operations concluded. In a separate post, he announced that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, had been killed. And then there's those reporter phone calls that he's been answering that you mentioned there. Those have been a bit brief and scattered. We've been getting some news from them, but for the most part, they have been these short conversations where there's not a lot of follow-up. In his most recent planned scripted video that he put out, Trump called this one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military operations that the world has ever seen. He said that combat operations will continue in full force until objectives are achieved. Did not go into full details on what those objectives exactly are, where that line would be.
Yeah. That's such a crucial point. Julia, thank you very much at the White House. Alexander Corbell from Reuters has been with me here through the evening in Tel Aviv. Kareem Sadjapur and retired Lieutenant General Charlie Moore are also with us. General Moore, let me just start with you. I mentioned at the top of the hour these new images that we have, a propaganda video released by Iran showing, you know, what they say are drones that are stored in a cave that they, you know, are saying are ready to go and hit U.S. bases in the region. I want to emphasize, we don't know when they filmed this. We can't tell, right? Did they do this before with the intention to put it out now? We don't know. We do know that they have the ability organizationally to put something like this out, but we're looking at this is an underground cave of drones. So, General Moore, how much capability do you think Iran has right now? One thing that this shows, okay, whether this was filmed now or whether it was filmed before, is that they obviously have storage of munitions in various places all around the country, including underground in caves that, you know, countless places where they're storing it.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. I mean, this is one of the main targets that the president laid out for the department to go after. And along with our Israeli allies, this is very, very important. It's not just a ballistic missile program, although that's what's getting a lot of discussions. It's also the drones and the cruise missiles that they can use to reach out and try to affect not only the U.S. bases and our personnel, but our friends and allies in the region as well. As you indicated, we don't know when that video was shot, but I will point this out. If nothing else, what we've learned is the incredible intelligence capabilities of the United States and Israel as it relates to Iran. And if we know exactly where the supreme leader and the other leaders in this country are at any given time, I promise you we have very good intelligence exactly where those types of systems are located, and they're high on the targeting list.
Alexander, as you and I stand here, and you can start to see it lightning, and it's obviously 5 o'clock in the morning. I will also note it was a full moon, so when we did see some very large jets come through, whether they were C-17s, we couldn't totally tell. They were flying through to an airbase near here not long ago. All the lights were off, right? We could see them because of the full moon. But you've got dawn coming. That used to be a time of, okay, maybe it's going to be quieter. Not the case now. Not what we have seen. It's sort of, wait, it's dawn, as Nick just said from Riyadh. What's about to happen in the Gulf, right? What is the very latest that you're learning?
Well, I've been speaking to a senior White House official who told me that while, yes, President Trump has said that he's ready to talk to leadership in Iran, that for now the operation, the campaign in Iran continues unabated, is what the official said. Now, Reuters has also reported, quoting sources, that Israel intends to continue striking political and security institutions in Iran. It is hoping to create the conditions that would allow for regime change.
All right, so Kareem, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that they're going to get Pezeshkian, they're going to get Larijani, they're going to get IRGC? I mean, is this just that they're going to just go down the entire list until there's nobody else? I mean, what do you read into this as the goal?
Aaron, when I read the president's most recent interview with the New York Times, it seemed to me that he's improvising. It's not totally clear in his head what his end game is. In that interview, on one hand, he evoked the Venezuela model, and he said that he liked that Venezuela model. You just take out the top person or the top couple people, and the people who come to power after that do a deal with the United States, and he's fine with that model. In that same interview, he also alluded to the idea that he wants to see the regime go and implode. The reality is that if the goal is to bring down the Islamic Republic, the types of officials that you would want to focus on are not the civilian officials like Foreign Minister Araqchi or President Pezeshkian. It's really the military, the Revolutionary Guard leadership. Those are the folks that you need to try to degrade. But it's a big question about whether taking them out and continuing to assassinate them, will that make them actually close ranks, or will that increase the fissures amongst them? Because I think the mentality of the security forces in Iran right now is that it's either kill or be killed, and they've shown themselves willing to kill en masse.
Yeah. Kareem, one of the things that Trump said earlier when you talk about him improvising was, we're offering, I don't know whether his word was immunity or clemency, but the point was to anyone in the IRGC who wants to, essentially come over to our side. Does that show understanding of the situation on his part?
Well, ultimately, if you do want the regime to fall, you try to peel people away from the regime and actually try to reassure them that if you do jump off this sinking ship, you're not going to be executed. But some of these people probably have a lot of blood on their hands. So ultimately, that is going to be a decision internally within Iran, whatever the next form of government it is. But I do think it is critically important, and perhaps this is something that the United States and Israel is already doing that we don't see, which is that you want to try to peel away people from within the regime, senior officials, and make it clear to them that this is a sinking ship.
Well, and I guess to your point, I mean, perhaps when we look at the strikes that they've had, the incredibly successful strike, right? Has some of that perhaps already been done, or is it the feeling of penetration? We simply don't know what we don't know right now. General Moore, I'm curious your reaction to what Kareem said, though, when he looks at some of the president's recent comments, President Trump's, that is, that it feels that he's improvising. Do you see it the same way, and what are the possible implications of that?
No, I don't think the president's improvising. I think the president recognizes that our military forces are best used to go and destroy and attrit capabilities in the nuclear program of Iran, while simultaneously taking on targets that we can help set the conditions for a potential regime change. It's extremely difficult to use military forces to directly result in regime change. I have no doubt that we're going to be able to achieve all our objectives that's been laid out by the president as it relates to the military targets. And I have no doubt that we can help set the conditions. But there's a lot of other factors in play, including the will of the people of Iran. And I do agree with what was commented on about trying to see some type of fracture in the senior leaders inside the traditional military, the IRGC, or the national security forces like the Basij. If we see that, then we could see the rapid collapse of the regime.
Alexander, from your reporting, is there a will, and I understand this is where U.S. and Israel may diverge or not, but when there's been obviously all the discussion about how a campaign by air does not successfully lead to regime change, at least historically, is there a will? Is there a possibility that there would be more than air power brought to bear by either the U.S. or Israel?
So we've heard from the Israeli military, I believe it was yesterday on Sunday, that there is no plan on the table to put ground troops in Iran. Now, that is the question, is that's what needed to engineer regime change. What Reuters has reported is that Israel wants to continue the campaign. However, there are some concerns within Israel that Washington could reach a kind of deal with with Tehran, and that would end the war, in Israel's view, prematurely.
Kareem, to that point, the Omani foreign minister once again coming out and putting diplomacy back on the table. Obviously, he came out on Friday night and tried to say that there had been a breakthrough, which was immediately met with the strikes that we saw. But I have seen discussion as to whether him coming in now and trying to open the door again is significant or not. How do you see it?
Well, the Omanis are always going to try to de-escalate and be a bridge between the United States and Iran. And we're in a fog of war situation now, Aaron. I read some reporting just before we came on that Ali Larijani, who's ostensibly one of the potential leadership successors to Khamenei, relayed a signal via Oman that he's prepared to talk to the United States. President Trump has also said that he's prepared to talk. So I think that the big question is in part related to Israel, which is, does Israel feel like this is an opportunity to go for the jugular? And while Iran is weak, it would be folly to start negotiations. And it's not clear to me, again, based on just the public statements of the president, if he has a clear end game in his head.
General Moore, what do you hear when the president says that the death toll, the U.S. casualties, could go up significantly?
Yeah, I think the president has been briefed and fully understands and has gone into this eyes wide open, that the risk that you face with large military operations like this, not only to our men and women, but the potential for others in the region, that's the ugliness of war. And so I think the president rightfully understands that that's the practical realities, and that we have to be willing to accept that if we want to bring about a change to the region.
Yeah, I guess. And we are back with this special edition of Out Front live from Tel Aviv on this Sunday night. Now here in the early hours of Monday morning, the IDF has just put out a warning for people in southern Lebanon to evacuate immediately as the war expands. The Israeli military is confirming it struck senior Hezbollah terrorists in the Beirut area. Our Jeremy Diamond reporting they were using some of their heavier bunker buster type bombs to do that here just in the past hour or so. President Trump is just speaking to the New York Times and telling them at this hour that the war, quote, won't be difficult. We have tremendous amounts of ammunition. You know, we have ammunition stored all over the world in different countries. The president also telling the Daily Mail that he expects this to go on for 4 weeks. As our Kristen Holmes has pointed out, other times he said 2 days, so it's very unclear. But the 4 weeks, obviously, and rightfully getting a lot of attention. Seth Jones is with us now, former advisor to the commanding general of U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan. Nazila Fathi is a former New York Times correspondent. She was based in Tehran for a decade, forced to flee the country with her husband and children. And she is author of The Lonely War, and also tonight, retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Mark Kimmett. All right, I'm grateful to all of you. So, Seth, President Trump telling the New York Times that this conflict, quote, won't be difficult because we have tremendous amounts of ammunition all over the world. Of course, it also comes as the reality of U.S. missile defense batteries, THAAD, has been obviously dropping precipitously without known replacement. What do you say to the president's comment tonight, though, that this won't be difficult because we have tremendous amounts of ammunition around the world?
Well, Aaron, I think one of the most significant concern is air defense, as you mentioned. Patriot munitions, PAC-2, PAC-3, as well as THAAD. I mean, it's worth noting that last year, over the span of just about a week, the U.S. expended about a quarter of its THAAD munitions in defense of Israel last year. And at this point, too, we don't have the Houthis yet that have entered the war. They may or they may not. If they do, then we're going to have to use some of those air defense systems as well to target their cruise missiles. They've got ballistic missiles and they've got drones. So part of the question is how confident we are that this won't spread more.
And General Kimmett, I mean, I suppose that is a real question. I mean, how confident can one be? I mean, there's been so far in terms of what many had expected might happen in the immediate aftermath, certainly in the administration, has not come to fruition. So, you know, where do you see this heading?
Well, first of all, I agree with Seth. The real issue is not necessarily to have enough ammunition for this fight, but it's for the other potential fights around the world. Obviously, the European Command wants, for Ukraine, the Indo-PACOM commander wants to make sure he has enough to defend against China. Where does this go? In many ways, it's not up to the president, nor is it up to Netanyahu. It's up to the Iranians. Look, this fight is going to go on until they capitulate and return to the negotiating table under different terms and are willing to accede to the demands of the United States.
And I actually, you know, the Omani foreign minister who has been central to the talks obviously tried to avert this, obviously, on Friday night by talking about the terms, is out again saying diplomacy is still on the table, which I want to ask about in a moment. But Nazila, you know, when the general says this comes down to the Iranians, obviously you're talking about the IRGC and Iranian leadership such that it is. What about the Iranian people, Nazila? You have family still inside Iran. I know your mother is among them. What is the best feeling you have right now for what people are feeling on the ground there?
Well, Iranians are hunkering down now. I mean, let's not forget that they just endured one of the worst massacres in the modern history of Iran. They were numb by that. And then when the news came that there's going to be a war, they started stocking food. They started making sure that they're going to be okay for a couple of weeks. I speak to people on the ground, and there is no traffic in large cities. People either have fled the cities or they're just staying home. I don't think Iranians are in a situation to come out again, protest, try to overthrow the regime. I think they are all waiting to see what's going to happen, especially because they see no fracture yet. I mean, the regime is still running the country. The missiles are being fired. They are getting constant messages from the regime telling them what to do, what's happening. So there is no sign that the regime is on the verge of collapse.
Seth, what is the significance of what Nazila just said? Because when you hear the IDF and you hear the U.S. administration talking about, we took out 48 leaders in one meeting, we decapitated, right. Okay, you think something very different, the way they set the stage, is going to happen than what Nazila just described, right? She's saying no fracture yet, and a regime, maybe not individuals, but a regime still very much in charge communicating with people. I mean, Seth, what is the significance of that?
Well, Aaron, I think what's significant is that the U.S. is trying to engineer a regime change from the air. I mean, I suspect there are a small number of U.S. personnel on the ground. I'd be surprised, frankly, if there weren't intelligence personnel on the ground. Yeah. You can't really engineer a regime change and expect that you can have a significant influence over the outcome from the air. So I think this raises a lot of questions about the future of the regime, and if the U.S. is unhappy with a regime that largely stays in place, will they continue to conduct strikes? Or if you get civil war and you get the regime cracking down and killing large numbers of protesters, will they conduct strikes to prevent that from happening? I just see a lot of potential scenarios where the U.S. may want to continue to conduct strikes. So I think it's going to be hard to put a specific timeline on this.
General Khamenei, when you hear the point that Seth was making about regime change from the air never having been successful before, I'm curious how you see this in the context of President Trump saying that there are likely going to be notably more U.S. casualties. I mean, do you see that as just his belief of how things will continue to go the way they are now, or is that somehow opening the door to a broader involvement?
Well, I think if we had a president here, he'd say nobody's talking regime change, and certainly not from the air. We're talking about regime decapitation, take out the highest level of the most extreme members of the government, and if they can be replaced by moderates, fine. If they can't be replaced by moderates, well, then we'll keep this war going. But the most important thing right now is that we don't have a regime vacuum, a vacuum inside of Iran, as Nazila said, where nobody knows who's in charge. The army goes out on its own. Look, there's some value into having order over the next couple of weeks, so at least we have somebody to be talking to. Pezeshkian and the leadership that is now providing a transitional council may be the right people to talk to. Pezeshkian is known to be a moderate, but the important thing is to see what happens to the IRGC and the other security instruments. The fact remains, if we can get through this with simply a regime decapitation replaced by a more moderate government that we can talk to, I think that's really what we're trying to get, and I think that's what the president is trying to get.
Yeah, interesting. Just thinking about when Ahmadinejad or Rouhani or Pezeshkian would brief the press how they came across differently. Ahmadinejad is so much more conservative. Obviously, they say they've taken him out. Pezeshkian, though, more moderate even in his presentation, but of course fully in line with the supreme leader and the accolades that he would talk about of him. Nazila, obviously Pezeshkian's still alive and in Iran right now, the president. And the Iranians have just put out this propaganda video. I'm going to show it. It's video, I understand, of drones in a tunnel. So it's propaganda, I guess, to show sort of their stockpile. We're talking about drones. We know they've got a lot of them, right? How many have been used in Iran? I mean, I'm sorry, in Ukraine, I believe up to 57,000. What does it say to you, Nazila, that they're, I guess to your point, that it's functioning, right? You're getting the propaganda video, you're getting the photos, you're getting that, there is some sort of a state apparatus functioning.
Definitely. They are flexing their muscles. They are showing their strength. They are trying to intimidate not only the United States and Israel, but also other countries in the region that they have attacked. And I just want to go back to Pezeshkian. He has become a member of the so-called interim council along with two other clerics. The other two clerics are quite radical. One of them is a 67-year-old that we know very little about, but he's an appointee by the supreme leader himself. And the other cleric is a judge and the head of the judiciary, who has been behind jailing of reporters, reformist politicians from the early thousands. And he's the one who's signing death sentences of protesters. So I highly doubt that the interim council that is now making decisions is going to be more compliant or more moderate, especially under the current conditions, that any kind of opposition would be seen as treason.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing all of that, such insight. Thank you all. I appreciate you. And next, we do have new satellite images coming in of military bases across Iran to understand better what they do show, what has happened so far. We're going to go through each of those images, show exactly what we understand that they factually show right after this.
Tokyo takes pride in keeping its city clean. But why? Edo spirit is what keeps Tokyo clean.
Connections across Africa are reshaping business, creating opportunities like never before. On Connecting Africa, follow the network of deals, smart conversations, and people transforming business to bring the continent together.
This month, Connecting Africa through rail infrastructure.
Trade cannot happen without faster movement of goods and services.
Connecting Africa, only on CNN, in association with Afreximbank.
Along a very ordinary city block, behind this unassuming door, there is a temple to misspent youth. A pinball museum.
You have to follow the blinking lights.
That's Mark, the lover of all things pinball.
This is actually the newest one in the collection. Yeah.
These are all the different movies. Oh, I love this.
Yes.
These machines are bringing back wonderful memories of too many hours spent playing when I should have been studying.
You know, my heart is pounding.
For Mark, the machines are more than a game. They represent an idea.
And we're back with this special edition of Out Front live in Tel Aviv, Sunday night Eastern Time, early Monday morning now here in the Middle East. Breaking news strikes across the Middle East in these overnight hours as President Trump tells ABC News' John Karl about the death of Ayatollah Khamenei. Quote, "I got him before he got me. They tried twice. Well, I got him first." That's according to a tweet from Karl, who points out that he is talking about what U.S. intelligence believes was a plot to kill Trump in 2024. All right, out front now is Democratic Congressman Adam Smith. He is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. And I appreciate your time tonight, sir. I mean, you know, I was talking to Congressman Lawler about that comment just a few moments ago. What do you make of Trump's comment to John Karl on killing the Ayatollah? I mean, obviously intelligence has said there were plots, right? But I mean, saying that basically it was about me or him, and I got him first.
Yeah, well, it's a huge distraction from what we really need to be focused on right now, which is the war in Iran. Now, no question, Ayatollah Khamenei was a horrible, awful human being. I mean, he just killed tens of thousands of his own people mere weeks ago. But where does this go from here? And the problem isn't just Ayatollah Khamenei, it's the Iranian regime. And there doesn't seem to be any clear plan for replacing that regime at the moment. And the president hasn't even been clear on whether or not regime change is the goal. We do not have a clear set of objectives in this war, and we are putting the men and women who are serving our country's lives at risk without a clear objective or a clear plan for achieving that objective. So, you know, I don't know the ins and outs. I know Iran certainly has threatened us before, but whether or not they actually tried to kill the president, I'm not sure. But that's not what's important right now. What's important right now is where does this war go and how does it advance U.S. interests?
Yeah. Well, and you talk about things like the world's largest oil channel perhaps effectively shut down. You talk about the world's largest airport. It is shut down. You talk about strikes across the Middle East in a way that we have not seen before. We're in an unprecedented moment. And you also have American service members who have died in this war of choice at this point. I mean, Trump told the New York Times that the Defense Department projections show that the number of U.S. troops, Congressman, casualties could be quite a bit higher than that. So if he's saying that, what do you think that means about where this is going?
Well, again, the more important point, I mean, first of all, the casual way he talks about that is disturbing, but the more important point is, what's the goal? But what are we trying to accomplish, and what is the reasonable means for achieving it? We have placed American lives at risk. There's no disputing that. Anyone who tries to predict how many Americans are going to be killed in this conflict, it's going to be very difficult to do. But the president needs to clearly explain to the American people what he's trying to accomplish. He's hinted at regime change, but you can't kind of halfway do regime change. And if it's not regime change, then what are we placing those lives at risk for? What have the American service people who already died for? What is he trying to accomplish? To prove to the world that Iran is a terrible regime? Well, we know that. But can our military fix that problem? It's seeming increasingly unlikely that they can, and the cost is enormous, certainly to U.S. service members, but as you mentioned, there have been civilians killed throughout the region. The Middle East is in a full-scale war that they really haven't seen since probably 1967, and President Trump is the one who kicked that off. Major, major cost. Mr. President, what is the benefit that you think we're going to be able to achieve?
So, Congressman, what could Congress do about it? At this point, in a sense, Pandora's box has been opened, okay? And Congress was not consulted. Is there anything at this point that the legislative branch, which is, supposed to be responsible for matters like this, can do?
Yes, absolutely. And there's something we could do, and that's the other terrible aspect of this, aside from the military miscalculation that seems to have been made in terms of what the U.S. can achieve here, is the fact that the president has taken us into this war in an unprecedented manner. He has not made the case to the American people. He's not made the case to Congress, and he hasn't gotten congressional approval to start what is undeniably a war. There have been previous conflicts where people have said, well, it's short term. They've come up with a whole bunch of different semantic reasons for why it wasn't really a war. This is a war, unquestionably, which should require congressional approval. Congress, at a minimum, should go on record on this. We should vote for the War Powers Resolution coming up, and we should say Congress has to approve this before it goes forward, and every single member of Congress should be on record. If you think this is a good idea, take the vote. I don't. I'd be voting no, but Congress can take that vote. And we can also cut off the appropriations. If Congress wanted to stop this war, if the Republicans leading Congress in the House and the Senate wanted to stop this war, we absolutely could. We've seen Mike Johnson throughout this whole process, going back a year plus now, continually bow to Trump and the executive branch and essentially make the United States Congress invisible. To abdicate our role and our responsibility under the Constitution. I think we should reassert it.
All right, Congressman Smith, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And I want to go now to Brett McGurk, former Middle East coordinator at the National Security Council. And Brett, as I don't know if anyone watching noticed, I was looking up a couple of times. There were just obviously several. We've seen, I don't know, I think 4 or 5 now over the past hour. Very large planes, some with all their lights turned off as it was dark. Now it's dawn, coming back to Israeli military bases. Obviously, we don't know why, but it is just part of the ongoing nature of this, that this is what we're experiencing on the ground. When you say right now, Brett, in terms of where we are, that Iran is using the same tactics as Russia. What exactly do you mean when you say that?
Well, specifically, Aaron, in the Gulf. I mean, the Iranians, a lot of their responses, I think, very predictable. The missile attacks against Israel, where you are, I dealt with that in the last administration, 2 massive waves of attacks in 2024. But the attacks in the Gulf, the Iranians are attacking, not just U.S. military facilities, which was maybe predicted, but they're also attacking through drone swarms and missiles civilian areas, hotels, residential areas, ports. And this is basically, it is the same tactic as the Russians. And Russia is firing Shahed drones, which the Iranians have provided that technology to Russia. So similar tech. Now, why is Iran doing that in the Gulf? This is important, Aaron. I think their objective is to force the Gulf states to then call Washington and say, hey, we need to de-escalate. We can't stand this anymore. But it's actually having the opposite effect. Yeah. And if you look at this, you know, tomorrow morning we'll be 48 hours into this. One inflection point I'm watching, and Nick Robertson from Saudi Arabia previewed it, is that over the last few hours, you've had statements from 5 Gulf states, Jordan and the United States, talking about acting in self-defense against these attacks. The Germans, the Brits, and the French have also put out a statement today. So you might see a bit of a coalition forming and possibly some joint military action here against those missiles. So again, what's Iran trying to do? They're trying to basically force the Arab states to encourage the U.S. to stop. It's having the opposite effect. It's having a galvanizing effect there. So that's where we are right now, but that is a key inflection point on where that goes, and I think we'll know over the next day or so.
We are live in Tel Aviv with the breaking news this moment. The Pentagon just releasing new video of strikes on fighter jets and drones in Iran, and they put a message with it saying U.S. forces taking bold action. And it comes as we have obtained incredible new satellite imagery, and this is really important. It does show extensive damage at military bases across Iran, as you might expect, but that is what it shows. Now, we're using these images to piece together how the United States managed to kill the country's supreme leader, and so many around him that they you know, after they thought dark was light, darkness was done, they're going to have this meeting, and was taken out. The U.S., we understand, had secretly been trailing him with intelligence for months. Katie Polglaze is out front with this incredible report.
With Iran very much still under attack, we've been using videos and satellite images like this one of the strike on the Supreme Leader's office to analyse how the senior leadership was dismantled by US and Israeli strikes and where exactly they've hit.
We now know from US and Israeli sources that the CIA, along with Israeli intelligence, had been tracking Iran's senior leadership for months. Then came intelligence about a perfect opportunity to strike in broad daylight, when many of Iran's top officials would be in the same place at once.
And that place was here, the leadership house and the hub of Iran's power. It's also the office of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now confirmed dead. It's in a very old, traditional Tehran neighbourhood, surrounded by government offices, scientific institutions and museums. Khamenei was known to not leave this compound much. He was seen here in this video just last week, addressing crowds at a mosque. The Israelis say they hit 3 sites on the compound simultaneously. We found several locations that have damage. You can see a central building completely flattened. You can also see 2 craters here. This one appeared to have been targeting an underground structure, according to a former US Special Operations Tactical Advisor, Wes Bryant. Over here, you can see crowds and emergency and construction vehicles. But this wasn't the only location hit. The Intelligence Ministry headquarters was also up in smoke yesterday. And then there's this strike, right outside the house of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He has today been reported dead by some Iranian outlets. CNN has not been able to confirm his death. Ali Shamkhani, a senior advisor to the Supreme Leader, has also been reported dead by the Iranian authorities. He narrowly escaped death last June when Israel struck his home in this precise targeting of a top-floor apartment. Almost miraculously, he emerged from the rubble days later. This time, he was not so lucky. But others have been. The Iranian foreign minister here, Abbas Araghchi, was away in Geneva this week. The Oman Foreign Ministry posted this picture of him meeting his counterpart just 4 days ago. That trip may have saved his life. But Iran is very much still under attack. This IDF footage from Sunday morning shows a strike on the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the notoriously brutal elite wing of Iran's military. What happens next remains to be seen, but Iran is aggressively fighting back, striking multiple US allies across the Middle East, including the United Arab Emirates. Fires visible here over Dubai's port area, alongside Kuwait, Qatar and Bahrain. Katie Polglaze, CNN, London.
All
All right, I want to go to retired Army Major General Spider Marks now out front, head of the geopolitical intelligence at Academy Securities. And, you know, when you look at Katie's reporting, it's just incredible, the detail, and to look at that. Khamenei rarely left the compound where he was ultimately killed. OK, so in a sense, as she reports, that was common knowledge, right? But the reason that they did this when they did it, we understand, is because all of the senior leadership came in here. I mean, there was probably no bigger, you know, one strike to take out all that could have existed than this one. And it should have been pretty obvious that such a thing could have happened, I guess, in retrospect. I mean, what do you think, Spider? Was there any sign that this was coming to the Iranians? They obviously did not think they had been penetrated.
Totally surprised. I think it's a combination, really speculation on my part, but I think it's a combination of hubris on their part and the notion that they had been in negotiations with the administration over the course of several weeks, and reports at the end of last week indicated that progress had been made. In other words, they probably understood that they were now negotiating themselves into a position where there might be a delay on the part of the administration, that they were favorably aligned in some particular areas. And so who knows? It's absolutely baffling that they would do that, right? But also you have to understand that someone who doesn't leave the compound for weeks on end probably is not surprising. We saw that with Osama bin Laden, although he never left that thing for the longest time. But he also isolated himself, and he kept it very clear that his support network was as probably well-trained as they could be to obfuscate their kind of connectivity. In this case, bringing 40-plus leaders to see the boss, very bad idea. But again, I think it's probably those two factors that probably played into it. They probably thought they had more time, and technical talks were going to take place in Vienna on Monday. Obviously, those are off the table, of course.
Yeah, so it was a false sense of security. And interesting, though, I mean, given his age and his health, there had been probably, never mind the infighting, but also planning for his replacement. In addition to the fact that last summer, right, I mean, his senior leadership did a ceasefire without him even knowing about it because he was in a bunker, right? So, you know, when we look at who's replacing him now, I guess that context does matter. We do know, Spider, that the CIA had been tracking senior leadership in Iran, though, for months. Okay, for months. Can you, you know, as having spent your career doing intel as well, how much preparation and planning, like what goes into doing that?
Oh, it's a phenomenal amount of tradecraft. And it's just not the 4 months, the 3 months that has been reported. This is, opportunities like this are very rare, and the preparation is extremely long. The horizon is quite considerable. You go into very, very deep patterns of life. You use all manners of intelligence. You're getting all the signals intelligence. You're reading their emails. You're into their phones. You check their patterns, as I've indicated. And then you've got the human element, as you've described, which is those sightings that occur as a matter of routine. And then also you look at the possibility for penetration into the inner circle, or at some point, and every senior leader has got multiple circles, these concentric circles, right? The levels that they trust, the levels that they may not trust, or they trust less well. So it is an incredibly long horizon of work that allows you to get into a position to say, look, I've got a level of confidence that they're going to meet tomorrow, and that's all I have, and this is where the location is. Then you take it from there.
Breaking news as we are live tonight from the Middle East. We're in Tel Aviv, where President Trump just told the New York Times that the number of U.S. casualties from the war with Iran, and I'll just pause before I read the quote here because just take a deep breath, could be quite a bit higher, the U.S. casualties. So far, the United States says that 3 service members were killed in a drone strike by Iran at a U.S. base in Kuwait. But the President of the United States is now saying that this could go quite a bit higher, a stunning admission. But of course, the strikes that we have seen already coming in from Iran have been deadly, including some of the deadliest we have seen of this war. We've got new video just in from Lebanon after Israel announced it was hitting Hezbollah there, targets across Beirut. So we heard that, and Hezbollah said it was going to retaliate retaliate. Some of the booms we heard here at the top of the hour, we now understand, our Jeremy Diamond confirming, were actually incoming from Hezbollah, but that has now been responded to by the Israelis with strikes across Beirut, coming as the death toll is rising in Israel as well as Iran since the start of this war. Jeremy Diamond is out front with more.
A powerful blast rocking this city on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Rescue workers scramble to the scene, smoke billowing in the air of this residential neighborhood. Before long, the wounded are rushed out on stretchers, and the dead carried out in body bags, one after another. Israeli police say at least 9 people were killed and a synagogue flattened in what is Iran's deadliest missile attack yet. Under the rubble, an even more tragic story.
Beneath that synagogue, we understand that there was a bomb shelter, and there were people sheltering inside there who believed that they were safe as those air raid sirens were going off. But as you can see here, it appears that this synagogue collapsed on top of that bomb shelter and multiple people were killed.
The next block over, more destruction. One home after the next bears fresh scars of this missile attack. Windows blown out, ceilings caved in, residents taking stock of all they've lost and thanking God for all they did not. Every Sunday I work nights, Ophir says, but by chance today I worked in the morning. It meant he wasn't home when the missile struck. 2 houses down, total destruction.
This isn't just the rubble of a home destroyed by an Iranian ballistic missile. It is also evidence of the kind of split-second decisions that people have to make amid this conflict. The woman who lived here decided to take her 5 children across the street to her neighbor's house, and it's only thanks to that decision that their lives were saved.
That neighbor, Inbal Ohana, takes us inside the safe room where they all huddled with their children. This was really a miracle because look outside, there's nothing left. They have no safe room, so they come to us during the alarms. And essentially, we all survived. You saved them, I tell her. Yes, thank God, yes. She says she's just glad they didn't go to the public shelter beneath the synagogue, where there are no miracles to be found.
It's just hard to hear. Jeremy Diamond is here with me now, and I know you were there today. And as we're here and now hearing this back and forth between Hezbollah, I think there had been some who had hoped, because of the decimation that Israel had, unleashed upon Hezbollah before, and their at least immediate silence, that perhaps we weren't going to see their involvement. Not the case now.
Yeah, and it very much seems like Hezbollah has made, quite a foolish error if you consider the kind of firepower that Israel is going to bring to bear, the kind of firepower that Israel has been preparing to bring to bear in Lebanon, and the fact that, frankly, Israel was waiting for an opportunity to be able to conduct major operations in Lebanon. There's a reason why they were able to strike back very quickly after those first missiles from Hezbollah, not just with, the kind of garden variety strikes in southern Lebanon that we see, but they are currently striking in Dahia, the southern suburbs of Beirut. Multiple strikes have been reported in Beirut at this hour, and this is a new front in this war, and I think that you're going to see Israel significantly focus on targets across Lebanon, Hezbollah targets there. This is going to be a major front.
Incoming that we heard, they said in open areas, they didn't want to waste air defenses perhaps on those, unclear what the reason was, but, we certainly heard them without any warning. All right, Jeremy Diamond, thank you very much.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett, and welcome to this special Sunday edition of Out Front, live from Tel Aviv. It is now 4 o'clock in the morning where we are standing with an entire region now under attack. And here where I am, we've heard those explosions within the past hour as the U.S. and Israeli war with Iran is escalating. Most recently, explosions to the north near Lebanon, where a new front of this war appears to be opening up. The Israeli Defense Forces says that it struck senior Hezbollah terrorists in the Beirut area, the Beirut suburbs, after Israel says it intercepted several projectiles launched into Israel from Lebanon just within the past hour. It all comes as President Trump says the strikes on Iran may continue for up to 4 weeks. And we are learning that the 3 American service members who were killed in action were stationed in Kuwait on the base there. A source is telling CNN tonight that they were killed by a suspected drone strike from Iran. 5 others were seriously wounded. And the president of the United States is now saying that there may be more, significantly more American deaths as the operations against Iran continue. And tonight, a new warning from Iran's foreign minister after the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed in the initial strike. He says that Khamenei's death makes this war more dangerous and more complicated. Well, that seems to be the case right now as it plays out. A sobering statement given what we have seen so far, just even over these past 40 hours since this began. You can see the number of locations targeted by U.S., Israeli, and Iranian forces, sort of a back and forth now across this region. U.S. and Israeli strikes in red, Iranian strikes in yellow. And we have a team of reporters across this region tonight as we cover this for you. And I want to begin, though, at the White House, where President Trump has been making these comments in some, brief interviews, and now saying this to the New York Times about more service members likely dying, talking about a time frame to the Daily Mail. And Kristen, you're getting limited information, though. I mean, from the White House about the attack. They when it came to Venezuela, was so quick to go out and have that press conference. We were all watching it in real time. Here, though, other than those very brief television interviews, no public questions, being relatively quiet about this. Do you know why and whether that will change imminently?
Well, it certainly doesn't seem like it's going to change. I mean, just remember, Aaron, it wasn't just the press conference. It was that after what happened in Venezuela, we saw President Trump at the cameras a number of times. They put out administration officials. President Trump would take questions about the capture of Maduro almost every time he was seen in public. This is not a setup, the current schedule that we've seen for tomorrow, that is conducive to questions. He has much of his day behind closed doors, policy time, executive time, signing time. He has one Medal of Honor ceremony, which we will see him in public. We'll see if he talks about this at all during those remarks, but that's not conducive to questions. Those events are in the East Room, and it's hard to get access to him to actually ask him questions. And of course, no White House briefing. So unclear if any of this will open up, if any of this will change. But right now, it certainly seems as though the White House is keeping the messaging to these very strict, scripted videos that President Trump has done that have been edited by the White House. There was no press present. And then these kind of short 3 to 5 minute interviews that he's been doing over the phone. Remember, we saw no administration officials out there talking about this. And in fact, the only information that we've really gotten from the administration, other than, again, these interviews that President Trump is doing, which, Aaron, some of them have been inconsistent. At one point, he said he could get out in 2 days of Iran. Then he said it was going to take 4 weeks. It was always going to be 4 weeks. The statement he put out said it would at least be 1 more week. But in addition to that, we didn't see any of these administration officials putting anything out there. And the only thing we got was a background briefing from administration officials in which they said that there was new intel that indicated potential preemptive strikes from Iran. Well, my colleagues, Natasha Bertrand and Zach Cohen, are now reporting that during a briefing today, Pentagon officials told Hill staffers that there was no new or imminent threat. There was nothing preemptive, that everything was essentially that Iran is a threat, which of course we know, but there was no indication of why these strikes had to happen. So a lot of questions here, Aaron.
Definitely a lot of questions, and that contradiction on imminent threat is obviously beyond an elephant in the room. Kristen Holmes, thank you very much. And I want to go now to Congressman Jason Crow, a Democrat who sits on both the House Armed Services as well as the Intelligence Committees, also former Army Ranger. He served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So, Congressman Crow, I appreciate your time. We've now confirmed that there are 3 U.S. service members killed by an Iranian drone at the U.S. base in Kuwait. We know there's an investigation into how that happened. But what President Trump just told the New York Times, incredibly sobering, he said that Defense Department projections show the number of U.S. casualties, and I want to quote to you, Congressman Crow, could be quite a bit higher than that. What does that say to you?
Oh, I'm furious, Aaron. I'm absolutely furious because Donald Trump is very cavalier with other people's lives. He loves pounding his chest and acting tough and talking about the costs of war, but he knows nothing about the costs of war, nor do his billionaire donors, nor do any of the political elites in the White House that he's surrounded himself with. They are very quick to play with other people's lives and other people's money, right? They are doing this without debate, without transparency, without any justification. And who is left holding the bag but our service members and the working class of this country?
U.S. intelligence does not back up the argument that Iran was, making progress on ballistic missiles that could hit the United States. So we already know about that inconsistency. But senior administration officials yesterday said something else in addition. They said that the U.S. attacked Iran because Iran was planning to strike the U.S. preemptively and posed an imminent threat. They were implying, an imminent threat to U.S. installations in the region, perhaps U.S. bases. But then Pentagon briefers told congressional staff today, so one day later, your staff is told Iran was not planning to strike U.S. forces or bases in the Middle East unless Israel attacked Iran first, which of course it did in this case, and now we're seeing it. So do you think that the people briefing you are, or that are saying these things are just lying? Are they, what's happening here?
Yes. They are lying to us and to the American people. That is what is happening here. There is no intelligence. I want to be really clear. There's no intelligence that shows an imminent threat to Americans or the American people from Iran. Now, Iran is a rogue terrorist regime. That is true. But there has to be an imminent threat to us for the president to unilaterally conduct military action without congressional debate and without congressional authorization. And the reason why congressional involvement is important here is because that is the accountability mechanism. That's the accountability mechanism to make sure that we don't have a president that will get us into a quagmire without the consent of the American people, because it's the American people that have to do the fighting and the dying and the financing of it. And they're just bypassing this whole process, and they're lying to us about it, right? The analysis doesn't begin and end with, is Iran bad, right? Iran is bad. The regime is bad. There's no doubt about it. But the Taliban was also bad. ISIS is also bad. Saddam Hussein was also bad. And we screwed up those conflicts in a pretty big way. So this has to be course corrected, and it has to be corrected immediately.
Okay, but how does Congress do that? Because right now, I think so many in the United States, they look at Congress and it seems at best that you have your arms and legs tied, right? Your arms are tied behind your back, your legs are tied together. I mean, is there anything Congress can actually do to so-called course correct, as you're calling it?
Well, my immediate concern is the protection of our servicemen and women who have been put in a terrible position right now. We're already seeing fatalities, and my heart goes out to those families who have just heard the most devastating news that their loved ones have been killed in action, right? And there is tremendous danger for the almost 50,000 service members who are in this region as this snowballs out of control. So we are pressing hard. Democrats in Congress are pressing hard for answers. How are they going to protect our force? Do we have enough munitions to protect our force? Do we have the intelligence to make sure that we can intercept these drones and these missiles? So we are pushing hard for answers, and I'm returning early to Washington to do that. Then we're also going to force a vote, either on Wednesday, probably Thursday, so we can actually take a tally of who's willing to actually stand up in Congress and exercise your constitutional duty, not just your right, but your duty to say whether or not the president should be doing this without the consent of the American people. So we're going to take a vote, and we're going to take that tally.
All right, Congressman Crow, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And here on the ground in the Middle East, here in Tel Aviv tonight, Nick Payton-Walsh joins me. It is pretty sobering what he's saying, that, what they're being briefed on, that he's saying it's it's a lie, right? I mean, again and again, we're told there was this specific threat, there was this one, and then the intelligence comes out and says that that's not the case. It is a pretty stunning moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's almost like 2003 all over again when the US invaded Iraq, but no one's bothering to put up the kind of general pretense or justification for it. They're essentially just saying, we're going to do this and trying to clean up the mess afterwards. And I think all of this increases the pressure on the longevity of this whole exercise, because if we find ourselves in a weeks-long or a months-long enterprise here, then these questions are going to get more vocal, more precise, and I think we're still dealing with the issue that way back in March of last year, the DNI assessment was that Khamenei had not ordered his officials to restart the pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Right. Yet still we had the June bombing, yet still we had the suspicions emerging here. The problem, I think, for the Trump administration is if your goal really is regime change, which if you read through all of this, that seems to be ultimately what it is, this current plan doesn't seem to get them there right now. If you listen to what the president said earlier on, long-range missiles and nuclear weapons were the things that he was really keen to see gone, and it was kind of like a nice to have if there was a popular uprising.
And I mean, not to get into military theory, but when you read so much of it out there, right, that regime change, such that it has ever been, has not been accomplished merely through air power, that it would require ground troops, something that certainly the U.S. there's been no indication that they want to do that. Okay, but I guess this raises the question then, we know what the goal is here in Israel, right? This is an opportunity literally of his lifetime for Prime Minister Netanyahu for regime change, for something different. When you look at Trump's map in Venezuela, right, that was about regime change, except for it wasn't. It was about somebody who was pliant, even if they were as much an engineer of the existing regime as Maduro, right, in the form of Delcy Rodriguez. So those two goals don't seem to match.
Yeah.
So what then happens?
I mean, we are potentially dealing with a moment of hubris here, right, where somebody thinks that the success, relative as it is in Venezuela, can be easily applied to here. But we don't know what the final calculation was prior to this launching, whether there was simply a decision between Israel and the United States that by removing this vast part of the autocratic regime in
sort
Iran,
of a moment of opportunity with this meeting
that would just by definition would suddenly somehow make everything better, that you couldn't get any worse. But I don't think all the unknowns we have here now of who's going to lead, are they going to be a hardliner, are we going to see any popular uprising here, like what we're seeing with Hezbollah here, which it seems as though a very weak group is making an awful mistake here. But that's repeating what we're seeing for a lot of Iran across the region here, attacking neighbors who weren't in the fight but are now in the fight, bringing in Hezbollah and potentially opening up another front which will increasingly devastate their position, already very weak inside Lebanon as well. All this poor strategizing is essentially the risk of the unknown as things start to spiral out of control and stop this from being what seemed to start as a limited decapitation exercise where they had a massive hope there'd be some kind of popular uprising and change, and now we have to deal with these unintended consequences spiraling out.
Right. Yeah, certainly if there was a belief that there would be, this would happen Saturday morning and by the night there would be mass people in the street, obviously that has not happened. All right, Nick Payton-Walsh, thank you very much. And our breaking news coverage continues. The attacks on Iran and Israel intensifying tonight with new attacks now being reported in Lebanon. We'll be right back.
Weekdays on CNN.
Tonight on 360.
The stories that matter.
This whole area is just engulfed in flames.
From a trusted voice.
We witnessed something nobody alive has ever seen before.
And we are back with this special edition of Out Front live from Tel Aviv on this Sunday night. Now here in the early hours of Monday morning, the IDF has just put out a warning for people in southern Lebanon to evacuate immediately as the war expands. The Israeli military is confirming it struck senior Hezbollah terrorists in the Beirut area. Our Jeremy Diamond reporting they were using some of their heavier bunker buster type bombs to do that here just in the past hour or so. President Trump is just speaking to the New York Times and telling them at this hour that the war, quote, won't be difficult. We have tremendous amounts of ammunition. You know, we have ammunition stored all over the world in different countries. The president also telling the Daily Mail that he expects this to go on for 4 weeks. As our Kristen Holmes has pointed out, other times he said 2 days, so it's very unclear. But the 4 weeks, obviously, and rightfully getting a lot of attention. Seth Jones is with us now, former advisor to the commanding general of U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan. Nazila Fathi is a former New York Times correspondent. She was based in Tehran for a decade, forced to flee the country with her husband and children. And she is author of The Lonely War, and also tonight, retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Mark Kimmett. All right, I'm grateful to all of you. So, Seth, President Trump telling the New York Times that this conflict, quote, won't be difficult because we have tremendous amounts of ammunition all over the world. Of course, it also comes as the reality of U.S. missile defense batteries, THAAD, has been obviously dropping precipitously without known replacement. What do you say to the president's comment tonight, though, that this won't be difficult because we have tremendous amounts of ammunition around the world?
Well, Aaron, I think one of the most significant concern is air defense, as you mentioned. Patriot munitions, PAC 2, PAC 3, as well as THAAD. I mean, it's worth noting that last year, over the span of just about a week, the U.S. expended about a quarter of its THAAD munitions in defense of Israel last year. And at this point, too, we don't have the Houthis yet that have entered the war. They may or they may not. If they do, then we're going to have to use some of those air defense systems as well to target their cruise missiles. They've got ballistic missiles and they've got drones. So part of the question is how confident we are that this won't spread more.
And General Kimmett, I mean, I suppose that is a real question. I mean, how confident can one be? I mean, there's been so far in terms of what many had expected might happen in the immediate aftermath, certainly in the administration, has not come to fruition. So, you know, where do you see this heading?
Well, first of all, I agree with Seth. The real issue is not necessarily to have enough ammunition for this fight, but it's for the other potential fights around the world. Obviously, the European Command wants, for Ukraine, the Indo-PACOM commander wants to make sure he has enough to defend against China. Where does this go? In many ways, it's not up to the president, nor is it up to Netanyahu. It's up to the Iranians. Look, this fight is going to go on until they capitulate and return to the negotiating table under different terms and are willing to accede to the demands of the United States.
And I actually, you know, the Omani foreign minister, who has been central to the talks, obviously tried to avert this, obviously, on Friday night by talking about the terms, is out again saying diplomacy is still on the table, which I want to ask about in a moment. But Nazila, you know, when the general says this comes down to the Iranians, obviously you're talking about the IRGC and Iranian leadership such that it is. What about the Iranian people, Nazila? You have family still inside Iran. I know your mother is among them. What is the best feeling you have right now for what people are feeling on the ground there?
Well, Iranians are hunkering down now. I mean, let's not forget that they just endured one of the worst massacres in the modern history of Iran. They were numb by that. And then when the news came that there's going to be a war, they started stocking food. They started making sure that they're going to be okay for a couple of weeks. I speak to people on the ground, and there is no traffic in large cities. People either have fled the cities or they're just staying home. I don't think Iranians are in a situation to come out again, protest, try to overthrow the regime. I think they are all waiting to see what's going to happen, especially because they see no fracture yet. I mean, the regime is still running the country. The missiles are being fired. They are getting constant messages from the regime telling them what to do, what's happening. So there is no sign that the regime is on the verge of collapse.
Seth, what is the significance of what Nazila just said? Because when you hear the IDF and you hear the U.S. administration talking about, we took out 48 leaders in one meeting, we decapitated, right. Okay, you think something very different, the way they set the stage, is going to happen than what Nazila just described, right? She's saying no fracture yet, and a regime, maybe not individuals, but a regime still very much in charge communicating with people. I mean, Seth, what is the significance of that?
Well, Aaron, I think what's significant is that the U.S. is trying to engineer a regime change from the air. I mean, I suspect there are a small number of U.S. personnel on the ground. I'd be surprised, frankly, if there weren't intelligence personnel on the ground. Yeah. You can't really engineer a regime change and expect that you can have a significant influence over the outcome from the air. So I think this raises a lot of questions about the future of the regime, and if the U.S. is unhappy with the regime that largely stays in place, will they continue to conduct strikes? Or if you get civil war and you get the regime cracking down and killing large numbers of protesters, will they conduct strikes to prevent that from happening? I just see a lot of potential scenarios where the U.S. may want to continue to conduct strikes. So I think it's going to be hard to put a specific timeline on this.
General Khamenei, when you hear the point that Seth was making about regime change from the air never having been successful before, I'm curious how you see this in the context of President Trump saying that there are likely going to be notably more U.S. casualties. I mean, do you see that as just his belief of how things will continue to go the way they are now, or is that somehow opening the door to a broader involvement?
Well, I think if we had a president here, he'd say nobody's talking regime change, and certainly not from the air. We're talking about regime decapitation, take out the highest level of the most extreme members of the government, and if they can be replaced by moderates, fine. If they can't be replaced by moderates, well, then we'll keep this war going. But the most important thing right now is that we don't have a regime vacuum, inside of Iran, as Nazila said, where nobody knows who's in charge. The army goes out on its own. Look, there's some value into having order over the next couple of weeks, so at least we have somebody to be talking to. Pezeshkian and the leadership that is now providing a transitional council may be the right people to talk to. Pezeshkian is known to be a moderate, but the important thing is to see what happens to the IRGC and the other security instruments. The fact remains, if we can get through this with simply a regime decapitation replaced by moderate government that we can talk to.
Well, there's now already a new front in this war. Israel says it is striking Hezbollah militants in Lebanon. The Israeli military says it struck, quote, several senior Hezbollah targets in Beirut just hours ago, one in southern Lebanon. Earlier, Hezbollah says it launched missiles and drones at an Israeli army base in, quote, revenge for the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. U.S. Central Command released a video on social media saying its strikes on Iran continue. See that one there on what appears to be a military jet. President Donald Trump says now that he expects the war with Iran to last some 4 to 5 weeks. Satellite images are giving us a better look at the damage done to some military bases in Iran. These photos you're about to see here show structures hit in Kanarak, Iran. The images show buildings reduced to rubble. The exact damage remains unknown. Targeted strikes throughout Iran are responsible for the deaths now of not just the country's supreme leader, but several other senior officials, defense minister, secretary of the defense council, the commander of the Iran Revolutionary Guards, and the chief of staff of the armed forces. CNN's Katie Polglaze has more details on exactly how the U.S. and Israel carried out these strikes.
With Iran very much still under attack, we've been using videos and satellite images like this one of the strike on the Supreme Leader's office to analyse how the senior leadership was dismantled by US and Israeli strikes and where exactly they've hit.
We now know from US and Israeli sources that the CIA, along with Israeli intelligence, had been tracking Iran's senior leadership for months. Then came intelligence about a perfect opportunity to strike in broad daylight, when many of Iran's top officials would be in the same place at once.
And that place was here, the leadership house and the hub of Iran's power. It's also the office of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now confirmed dead. It's in a very old, traditional Tehran neighborhood, surrounded by government offices, scientific institutions and museums. Khamenei was known to not leave this compound much. He was seen here in this video just last week, addressing crowds at a mosque. The Israelis say they hit 3 sites on the compound simultaneously. We found several locations that have damage. You can see a central building completely flattened. You can also see 2 craters here. This one appeared to have been targeting an underground structure, according to a former US Special Operations Tactical Advisor, Wes Bryant. Over here, you can see crowds and emergency and construction vehicles. But this wasn't the only location hit. The Intelligence Ministry headquarters was also up in smoke yesterday. And then there's this strike, right outside the house of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He has today been reported dead by some Iranian outlets. CNN has not been able to confirm his death. Ali Shamkhani, a senior advisor to the Supreme Leader, has also been reported dead by the Iranian authorities. He narrowly escaped death last June when Israel struck his home in this precise targeting of a top-floor apartment. Almost miraculously, he emerged from the rubble days later. This time, he was not so lucky. But others have been. The Iranian foreign minister here, Abbas Araghchi, was away in Geneva this week. The Oman Foreign Ministry posted this picture of him meeting his counterpart just 4 days ago. That trip may have saved his life. But Iran is very much still under attack. This IDF footage from Sunday morning shows a strike on the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the notoriously brutal elite wing of Iran's military. What happens next remains to be seen, but Iran is aggressively fighting back, striking multiple US allies across the Middle East, including the United Arab Emirates. Fires visible here over Dubai's port area, alongside Kuwait, Qatar and Bahrain. Katie Poglaze, CNN, London.
Joining me now, CNN senior political and global affairs commentator Rahm Emanuel. Good to have you. Thanks for staying up late for us.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
So as we watch these joint U.S. and Israeli strikes continue, you've made the point that while the U.S. and Israel have cooperated before in military action, that the scale of this war and how integrated the two are in carrying out this war is unprecedented. Explain to us why and why that's important.
There's been an ethos in the Israeli Defense Force since Israel's existence that there would be no American blood ever spilled for Israel's security or fight in any one of Israel's wars. You've had covert operations like the Olympic Games that were cyber attacks on Iran's nuclear facility, but never before has Israel and the United States jointly operated militarily in an overt way. In fact, go back to the Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, Israel was told to stand down so it would not interrupt the American or disturb the American coalition that was built. This is totally different. And now we've lost 3 Americans and their families are going to have an empty seat at that dinner table. And it's done in this, yes, you could argue American security or strategic interest, but this is a new frontier. The genie will never go back in the bottle. And the repercussions, the aftershocks of this will be felt for many, many years to come.
Let's talk now about the U.S. perspective and the U.S. objective, crucially here, because going into this war, we heard a number of justifications. Initially, there was talk by the President of the State of the Union, as you remember, saying that Israel was soon developing a missile that could strike the U.S. Since then, we've learned that intelligence assessments...
You meant Iran.
Exactly.
You meant
Iran to strike the U.S. Apologies. But we've since learned that assessments do not show that to be true. We had been told that Iran was planning to strike the U.S. preemptively. We've since learned that was not true. And now this remarkable comment by Trump to ABC's Jonathan Karl to say that, yes, I had candidates in mind to lead Iran after the elimination of the Supreme Leader, but we killed those candidates in the initial round of the attack. Was there any post-game planning here, post-war planning that's clear to you?
No, I think it's very clear. First of all, let me back up. The damage to America's credibility is going to be severe. It happened in the Iraq War around the yellow cake. We gained it back with our intelligence about predicting when a lot of Europeans, including the Ukrainians, did not believe us that we said that Putin would attack. Now, not only while the intelligence is very good, the credibility of America and the veracity of America's word is going to be severely damaged and undermined, given all that the things that the president said that have turned out within less than 24 hours absolutely not to be true, and in fact, own elements of his, like in the Pentagon's briefings, just not true. That is going to be something that we're all going to have to earn back the trust and veracity when the president speaks. The second thing, I think, take a step back, Jim, and the way I look at this, for about 30 years, there's been two different Middle Easts. The prosperous, very successful, financially integrated to the world economy, Gulf countries. Then you had the failed states led by Iran of Syria, Lebanon, partly Iraq, Yemen, and these were all occupied somewhat by terrorist entities. The frontline defense in Lebanon, in Syria, destroyed, very damaged. Now it's down to what you have in Iran. And unfortunately for our Iranian people, the greatest export Iran's had is the brain drain of young people who are very smart, 90 million Iranians leaving the country. The Gulf countries don't have a population like that. And it tells you that what's happened here and why that part of the Middle East is on its back heel. Now, that said, had the United States president and President Trump kept the focus on nuclear capacity, ballistic missiles, and on strategic kind of security apparatus, he'd have broad support. He took it to a level which is the political, which is regime change, which is totally not possible, not from 25,000 feet in the air. And he's made something that America cannot achieve. We're 0 for 3 in the Middle East, Iraq, Libya, and Lebanon in the early 80s. And he's made something that you can't do. He could have had both unity at home, a very focused operation, a military strike, not a war, and he's done something and raised the expectation that anybody that knows anything, a modicum of history and understanding, knows is impossible. You cannot have regime change from 25,000 feet in the air.
It seems that President Trump has made a gamble that if this is short enough, and if the top of the Iranian regime at least is eliminated and the rest remains, Venezuela model. And by the way, he said that in another interview today, that the Venezuela model might work here, that despite the costs, et cetera, that the world will praise him here. Is he wrong in that gamble? Do we know yet?
Well, first of all, let me say this. The idea that you would say something like Caracas, Venezuela, would be a model for what you're going to do in Iran is just on the face of it absurd. Second of all, I do think one of the things that's been missed in I wouldn't say the reporting, but appreciation, for 46 of the 47 years of the theocracy of Iran, the IRGC was in supportive role to the mullahs. After the January war and the uprising in Iran and the killing of many, many brave Iranians, the IRGC is running Iran and the mullahs are in the supporting role to the military. There has been, not literally, but figuratively, a regime change. And the problem is, do they have control of the country? And so far it's proven not really, because they did something incredibly stupid, which is the rest of the Gulf countries are sitting on the sideline and they've attacked not our military entities, but those countries. And they've pushed them into being advocates for what the United States is doing. And that has been a stupid move by the Iranians, who are obviously on their back heels here.
Live in Tel Aviv, where dawn is now behind us, as you can see to the east, obviously. Daylight in Tehran, daylight in the Gulf, and now daylight dawning here in Tel Aviv, as we have breaking news with the CNN interview with a top Iranian official, current top official right now, amidst all of this, who is warning that Trump crossed a, quote, very dangerous red line. So what does that threat actually carry with it? Well, Fred Pleiken is out front with the conversation.
From religious aspect, he was a very great religious leader. So many of Shiite followers across the region and around the world are going to react to that, and this is very obvious because President Trump has a very dangerous red line, and of course, as a national sovereign country, we have to react on that because, nationally speaking, he also passed red lines. And what is happening right now is this fact that Americans have to pass a very hard exam of killing and assassinating the leader of another country.
President Trump has come out and warned Iran not to use harsh retaliation, or the United States would respond with something that the world has never seen before. What do you say to that?
If President Trump didn't want to see Iran hitting back, and pushing back. President Trump should have not started this war from the beginning. It was a war of choice. There was no necessity to start this aggression. That was act of aggression. And you can ask those who were in the meeting in Geneva. You can ask Omani Foreign Minister or Mr. Grossi. That was a breakthrough meeting. Kushner, Witkoff, and those people who were in the meeting. The terms and conditions of the agreements was there to the extent that we decided to meet on Monday in Vienna with Mr. Grossi to wrap up and nail it down. And then all of a sudden, again, Trump cheated. Again, they conspired behind the scene and it started act of aggression.
One of the things that we're seeing is that your forces are hitting a lot of targets in Gulf countries. Now, I know that the Gulf countries were involved in trying to prevent this war. Why are you doing that?
We are not attacking any neighbors that we do have. We did our best to make a rapprochement with them. They know that. We communicated with them either to shut down those American bases that are constantly threatening Iran and are constantly using to offend on Iran, or we have no option just to push back. We cannot reach out to American soil, so we have no option just to attack any bases which is under U.S. jurisdiction.
All right, that was our Fred Plaikin there talking to the Deputy Iranian Foreign Minister. Dan Diker's out front now, Middle East expert who's advised Prime Minister Netanyahu's office. He's also the president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Dan, I just want to ask you with what the Deputy Foreign Minister just told Fred Plaikin. Fred asked the very basic and crucial question, which is, why are you hitting countries like cities like Dubai in countries like the UAE? And the answer was, well, because of U.S. bases. But Dan, to state the obvious, there is no U.S. base in Dubai, based in Abu Dhabi. But what they hit in Dubai was a Fairmont hotel. They hit the airport, right? Those aren't U.S. installations. So do you understand why they're doing that right now?
I think so. I think what we have to look at, Aaron, is an ideology that is rooted in a radical Islamic eschatology, which we remember very well in the statements and the actions of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was the president of Iran, who was eliminated yesterday. But he was the president, if you remember, in the 2006 Iranian-Israeli-U.S. war in Lebanon, and he was talking about the necessary violence in the region against Sunni powers as well as Israel in order to bring back the emergence of the messianic figure, according to their own eschatology, called the Mahdi. Meaning, this is an ideologically fueled war from their point of view. It has been since 1979 when Ali Khamenei's boss, Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, took 52 American hostages, held them for 444 days, then killed 241 American servicemen and women at the Marine barracks, then shot up the USS Cole in 2000, and then killed hundreds of Americans in Iraq following the 9/11 American presence in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is an ideologically, religiously fueled regime. They don't need other excuses like territorial or political grievance in order to claim that they're responding to aggression by the Israelis and Americans.
So, Dan, obviously, as you've advised Prime Minister Netanyahu's office over many years, you did, he's been warning about Iran for years, right? And we all have seen, he's been saying right in front of the UN how close they are to a bomb, and his, using the Sharpie or the images that we can all indelibly see in our minds now, right? He has been saying that this is near, if not imminent, for a very long time. So what do you believe is going through his mind right now, after he eliminated the supreme leader that has been a focus and a scourge, as he sees it, for almost 40 years?
Well, first of all, you bring up a very important contextual point, because I think some of us are old enough, you may not be, but some of us are old enough to remember back in 1996 during Netanyahu's the first months of his coalition government. He stood in front of a session of the Joint Houses of Congress and warned about the Iranian regime's race for regional and nuclear supremacy. And he has been hyper-focused on what President Trump has now stated loudly and clearly in his two very recent declarations from Mar-a-Lago yesterday and then on February 28th on Saturday, which is this is a regime that is dead set on achieving nuclear weapons in order to eviscerate the Jewish state and hit the big Satan, which the Iranian regime leadership has always said is the United States. So Netanyahu's, what is going through his mind is A, I told you so, and B, thank God we have President Trump as the friendliest, most morally determined U.S. leader in decades, who's willing to take a principled and courageous decision to take great action against the regime. President Trump and Netanyahu are very much on the same page, strategically, I would say morally and tactically. We haven't seen this type of cooperation, one-to-one cooperation between these two nations in a very, very long time.
And we are back with a special edition of Out Front Live in Tel Aviv, and you can see it is now daylight here. We are through the evening, and it is now morning. Breaking news, Iranian state media has just released new images of the country's newly established interim leadership, making a point of saying, we're going to show you that we will meet even after what happened at the mass meeting when the Ayatollah Khamenei was eliminated along with 40 plus of his inner circle in the government, the IRGC. It comes as the Iranian foreign minister says a new supreme leader could be chosen, quote, in a day or two. We'll see. Obviously, they're putting on a strong face on it. But another potential contender, though, Reza Pahlavi, is speaking out moments ago. A fascinating character. He's the eldest son of the former Shah. He left Iran all the way back in 1979 during the revolution. At the time, he was a teenager. But he left, and he hasn't been back. He's been living in the United States ever since, but now is a central figure. Here's what he said.
They trust me as a transitional leader. Not as the future king or future president or future whatever. I'm totally focused on my mission in life, which is let me bring the country to a point that they can make that free choice. That will be enough for me having said mission accomplished.
Giovanna Caracha is out front with a closer look at who and what he is.
A celebration on the streets of London so many Iranians had been waiting for decades. Not long after the news broke of the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, crowds of Iranians, young and old, poured into this area of the British capital. Many loyal supporters of Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah of Iran. Pahlavi has been positioning himself to be the man who would lead Iran's transition if or when the regime collapses.
My dear compatriots, decisive moments lie before us. In these sensitive hours and days, more than ever, we must remain focused on our ultimate goal, reclaiming Iran.
Pahlavi is the eldest son of the last Shah of Iran. The now 65-year-old went to the United States when he was 17 and remained exiled there after his father was overthrown in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. For years, the exiled crown prince sought to present himself as a man who can lead Iran's opposition and rid the country of repressive theocracy. As protests over the state of the economy spread like a wildfire across Iran in December, Pahlavi seized on that and a regime weaker than ever. He called on Iranians to take to the streets on January 8th. On that night, the regime unleashed its most violent crackdown ever, killing thousands. In some of the video that emerged from the protests, people could be heard chanting for the return of the monarchy.
They called my name, they asked me to come to their support, and I have. And I accepted the challenge of leading the transition. As far as the plan that we have a plan before the regime's collapse, and particularly for the transition after this regime, which is very well documented and presented It's an open document. You can see it on the website of the Iran Prosperity Project. It talks about the initial 100 days. How do we manage that process? How do we avoid what happened in Iraq post-Saddam Hussein?
While Pahlavi does have the support of many Iranian monarchists who are nostalgic for the days of the Shah, it is unclear just how much support he really has inside the country. Iran's opposition is a fragmented one with different groups and no unified plan or vision for the future. You will hear many Iranians who want nothing more than an end to this regime saying a monarchy is not what they've been fighting for. They say Pahlavi hasn't set foot in Iran in decades. He's too disconnected from the people who have been on the front lines of the battle for freedom and democracy. His close ties to Israel quite public during his visit in 2023, where he was warmly welcomed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials, has also been a source of controversy and concern for many Iranians. The people of Iran are bracing for difficult days ahead. The death of Khamenei is not the end of the regime, but if that day comes, the leadership that follows may not be their choice. Jumana Karachi, CNN, London.
And next, America's largest cities are now beefing up their law enforcement over fears of possible attacks and reprisals inside the United States. The latest reporting on that is after this.
In the U.S. and from all around the world, I'm Jim Sciutto in Washington. As we enter day 3 of the U.S. and Israel's war with Iran, perilous times in the region, things are developing very quickly throughout the Middle East, with new explosions reported in Tehran in just the past several hours, and countries ordering evacuations from dozens of villages in Lebanon, where a new front in this conflict now appears to be opening. In Israel, at least 10 people have been killed, more than 200 injured since Israel launched military operations against Iran. 9 of those fatalities took place near Jerusalem, where a missile struck a bomb shelter on Sunday. Israeli forces are ramping up their attacks in Tehran and in Lebanon, on Beirut. Just hours ago, the IDF confirmed it had struck senior Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon's capital. The ceasefire there certainly over. Iran released this video of what it says were Revolutionary Guard drone tunnels storing weapons, which it says it then fired on U.S. bases in the region. On Sunday, President Trump told the New York Times that the conflict with Iran could last 4 to 5 weeks. His phrasing. It is the clearest indication yet of a possible time frame from the president, but the White House has warned that the conflict could, in fact, last much longer, and the president is now saying it could cost more lives. As of now, we know that 3 U.S. service members were killed in Kuwait on Sunday. It marks the first U.S. casualties since the launch of what the Trump administration is calling Operation Epic Fury.
Sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but we'll do everything possible where that won't be the case. But America will avenge their deaths and deliver the most punishing blow to the terrorists who have waged war against basically civilization.
There are new questions for the plan for the next step. Jonathan Karl of ABC News spoke to President Trump, and he is reporting that Trump told him, quote, the U.S. had identified possible candidates to take over Iran, but those candidates were killed in the initial attack. CNN's Ivan Watson joins us now live from Hong Kong. And Ivan, over the last 24 hours, you've been monitoring as the ripples of this war have expanded. Where are we seeing strikes now in the last several hours?
Right. We're hearing about explosions in Kuwait, for example, and as you pointed out, Lebanon is now part of the expanding kind of front of this growing regional war. I think it's, we have confirmation now of the first U.S. casualties in this conflict in the third day of this, coming from the Trump administration, at least 3 service members killed, with warnings that there are likely going to be more casualties. The Iranian government putting out this propaganda video that you showed before, I think it's worth looking at this because it demonstrates those Shahed drones, which had been used to such devastating and deadly effect by the Russian military in Ukraine for years. This purportedly a tunnel full of these weapons. Iran demonstrating that it's ready to go for the long haul in this conflict, even as much of its leadership has been decapitated, as President Trump has been signaling that this could go on for more than 4 weeks as well. There is a new reality in the Gulf, in those sparkling, shining cities like Dubai and Doha and Abu Dhabi and Manama in Bahrain, which have all been pummeled or targeted by hundreds and hundreds of drones and missiles over the course of the last 48 now more hours, growing. And a new reality setting in as those busy airline hubs that are headquarters to Qatar Air and Emirates Airlines and Etihad Airlines, they're shut down with travelers stuck, with commercial shipping also slowing down dramatically with reports of attacks on cargo ships and oil tankers. And we're watching what's going to happen to oil prices around the world as that. In addition to that, and I might note that Iranian officials, including Ali Larijani, who's the head of the National Security Council, and seemingly the most senior official surviving in the Iranian government right now, or speaking for the government, he insists that Iran is not targeting anything beyond U.S. bases in the region. I think that the governments in the Gulf would sharply disagree with that, as they have seen drones striking high-rise buildings and civilian airports from Kuwait to Dubai to Abu Dhabi to Bahrain. The new front that has just opened up in the last couple of hours is Lebanon, with the Iranian allied Shiite militia Hezbollah issuing an announcement that in revenge for the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, on Saturday, that Hezbollah was joining in the fray and declaring that at midnight, Sunday to Monday, that Hezbollah targeted the Mishmar HaCarmel missile defense site belonging to the Israeli army south of, as it puts it, occupied Haifa, with a barrage of precision advanced missiles and a swarm of drones. The Israeli response, quite swift. I've spoken to residents of Beirut describing hearing a succession of explosions at around 2:30 in the morning in Beirut around the southern suburbs, and still trying to assess what happened there. Reports of the Lebanese government, which had spoken out against getting involved in this conflict and condemning this move, holding emergency meetings. Reports from residents of highways clogged and panic because this came as a surprise to residents, to people, to the population in Lebanon, that suddenly they're being pulled into this conflict. The country's still battered from previous rounds of fighting between Hezbollah and Lebanon. And I might add, in addition to what's happening there, in Israel now declaring that 52 settlements across South Lebanon should evacuate, indicating that it may strike those areas. And it has been bombing parts of Lebanon for months, almost on a daily basis in the south and in the Bekaa Valley. We also have reports of a suspected drone strike targeting the British Air Force base in Cyprus. So here we have a European Union country, apparently only one indication of a strike, but also now being pulled into the growing consequences of this rapidly expanding conflict. Jim.
New fronts. I mean, that was exactly one of the concerns, right? That this would start small or relatively small and then expand to bring in other countries. It does seem to be what we're witnessing right now. Ivan Watson in Hong Kong, thanks so much. I do want to go Now to Julie Benbrook, who comes to us live from the White House. And Julie, these are confusing words to hear from the president as he's speaking to a number of reporters, offering seemingly different timelines, but also goals and also descriptions of the after plan. I mean, to tell Jonathan Karl that we had candidates picked out to succeed in Iranian leadership and then concede that they were killed in the initial phases of this strike, which of course the U.S. is involved in. I mean, does the White House have an answer for why those strikes don't match with the after plan?
A lot of this information is coming in a bit haphazardly. As President Donald Trump arrived back here at the White House tonight, I mean, reporters had a lot of questions for him, and he did not answer any of them. In fact, he has not answered consistent public questions since the joint U.S.-Israel attack against Iran. And as we have seen this play out, he's been giving these updates on social media. We saw that 8-minute video where he announced that these strikes had taken place, and he encouraged people in Iran to try and seize control of their government after U.S. military operations had concluded. Also, in a post on social media, he announced that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, had been killed. And then there are those various phone interviews that we have been referencing, but most of them have been brief. There's not a lot of room for follow-up in those. And in his most recent scripted prepared video that we saw him put out, he did say that this Operation Epic Fury, would continue in full force until the objectives are achieved. But he stopped short of going into detail of exactly what that line is for him, what the specific objectives he's looking for.